there was also this idea that they will not rebuild Spitak, but the people were against it. As the text mentions, the 1/3 of the inhabitants of Spitak died there during this earthquake, so the families didn't want to leave them there. So they wanted to stay with their, this is also a bit different.
Ja, voll geil. Schön, dass du da bist. Und es ist auch das erste Mal seit mehreren Monaten, dass Sebastian auch wieder am Start ist. Return of the Kluge. Das freut mich auf jeden Fall. Diesmal fangen wir, ich habe gar keine Ahnung, wie wir anfangen wollen. Ich habe auch ein paar Fragen aus Instagram. Das ist ganz interessant, weil ich frage eigentlich immer so eine Woche vorher oder so, poste ich bei Instagram, ob irgendwelche Follower halt Fragen haben für die Gäste, ne? Und dann ist es immer interessant, weil du hast das zum Beispiel auch gerepostet und dann kommen nochmal ganz andere Leute irgendwie, die halt nicht meine Follower sind, und dann denke ich mir so, wer ist das? Und das ist auch interessant. Und dann meistens sind das bei den Fotografengästen halt auch andere Fotografen, die dann halt Fragen stellen, so irgendwie. Das ist voll interessant. Weil diese, ja, ich weiß nicht, ob man es Community nennen kann, aber diese Fotografen unter sich sind irgendwie so, doch schon vernetzter, als ich mir es irgendwie so am Anfang so mal vorgestellt habe.
Aber Tim, jetzt habe ich eine Frage. Sind die Fragen alle auf Deutsch gestellt worden oder sind die hauptsächlich in englischer Sprache gestellt worden? Weil ich jetzt auf Instagram sehe, dass die Arbeiten in Polnisch und in Englisch quasi beschrieben werden. Deswegen überlege ich gerade, ob was besser wäre, je nachdem, wer halt zuguckt. Ne? Also ich weiß nicht, wer die Followerschaft gerade stellt. Ob es mehr englischsprachige Leute ist. Wäre vielleicht interessant, dann vielleicht doch auf Englisch zu switchen.
We can do that.
Yeah, let's be dynamic. Okay.
The questions were in German most.
Okay.
Yeah.
that ruins my plan now.
That ruins everything, but doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Maybe in the beginning, how and when did you decide to become a photographer?
Oh, well, I started to take pictures when I was 16, more or less. And I was quite lucky because we had in our school a meeting with a professional photographer from the art school here. And he was so kind that he told us that we can talk about our photographs, about our pictures, even in 1 or 2 months. So we can just call him and bring him new stuff, and he will tell us if it's okay or not. And I was so passionate about photography and about this idea that I actually was very often calling him and asking for a meeting, and he was so nice that he meet with me, and it was a straight road to study photography. So basically he prepared me for with me my portfolio, and I right after my secondary school I passed the exams to the Institute of Creative Photography in Opava in Czech Republic, where also he was studying. Piotr Szymon was his name, and other photographers from Silesia, so from the region where I am, and also from Białystok region, which is actually quite far away from South Poland. This is northeast Poland. So there was a nice community of Polish photographers there. So I, with 19 years old, entered this community of older friends, and this was actually the true beginning of my education and other influences that I was studying.
Interesting. Is it like to become a photographer in Poland? Is it like a normal route, or is it still? I think in Germany it's becoming better, but it's still not a typical job you would choose. Do you know what I mean? Like, if parents think about it, or what are you doing? What do you want to do with your life? Photographer isn't like the first thing comes to mind.
Yeah. I have great parents, so they accepted my idea really quickly. And I'm from this generation that in Poland we were pushed by the older generation to study something which can bring in the future a lot of money, like economics or management or medicine or something like this, or law. So most of my friends were going into this direction, and I was the only one that chose this quite weird path. And to be a bit, how can I say it? I also chose a different study. So I studied also Spanish language here in Poland, just to have a backup, if it will not be a good decision. So yes, you are right. I think that that the most important thing was that my parents accepted it very quickly, so they supported me in that decision. And also, as I told you, most of my friends were studying like those subjects that I mentioned earlier.
Interesting. What were your parents doing for work?
They are not connected to art. They are just having regular jobs. My father was a manager of a restaurant, and my mother earlier was working as in an architectural bureau. She was making the drawings for the architects in the time where there was still no printers and software to do the projects, and then she was working as an accountant.
Interesting. Do they understand what you're doing for a living? And in the studies?
After 20 years, they are quite good educated, and I always try to show my works to people that are not involved in this photographic community or even in art, to see if they understand more or less what I had in my mind. And I have to say that unfortunately my parents are too educated for this, and I cannot make those judgments with them, because they have their own opinions already. They are quite interested in the Polish scene, so they go to the openings of exhibition as well. So
yeah, they're spoiled. Spoiled. Has it been like 20 years when you finished your studies already?
Well, this is complicated because in Opava, in this school, you can study pretty a long time. So till my master, I needed like 8 years to do it. So
that's totally normal, by the way.
Yeah. So I was 27.
It took me 8 years too.
Yeah. So I was 27, and then I have like 3 years or 4 years a break, and then I started the PhD studies, which I finished in 2018, I think. So it was quite a long time in one place.
Yeah. What is the this university, or what is does it have a focus? Like, is it more like documentary, fashion, art, or is it everything?
When at the beginning of the 20th century, it was more focused on documentary photography, and this is the answer why so many Polish students went to Opava, because in that period of time there was no high school in Poland where we could study documentary photography. It was more in the direction of art photography, or how do you want to call it? So many of us went there because we were fascinated by this Czech tradition of classical black and white photography, like Józef Koudelka or Jindřich Streit or Cudlin or Markéta Luskačová. But in the years when I was studying there was a shift. And then I think the school went more into creative digital photography, I would say. There was a period of time when the digital photography entered, and many of the students tried to make some kind of documents using a retouch or digital cutting and pasting and everything around this. But till today, I think the school is more focused on documentary, on social issues, on the reality, more or less.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really cool that this photographer helped you like prepare for it. Was it hard to get in, or were you accepted first try?
Well, I was accepted by first trial, but everything what I had in my portfolio were my first photographs. So
yeah, that's interesting.
As far as I remember, in the portfolio we had to include two stories, 1 7 and 1 8 pictures, and self-portrait, and some kind of photographic illustration to literature. So I made a document about hunters, because my father was a hunter. So I went with him all year long and was making pictures. And then the other one was some kind of art school for kindergarten children. So very, like academic topics. And the hunter's story was quite okay. I have a sentiment to it. So there are some pictures that show that I could have an ability to frame or something like this. The other one was really poor, but I did it. And then but I had like the minimum points to get in. So they had to talk with me as well, and I was talking with them with passion, and that's it. They told me that my speech was quite amazing, so that's why I'm in, not because of the pictures.
Oh wow! And when you look at these pictures now, what has changed for you?
Comparing to today, I think I was more, like 20 years ago, I was more interested in the aesthetics of photography than in the power of the picture itself. Like a picture, what can it make, or what does it mean to make a picture? So I was really into black and white photography, quite weird. I was trying to frame it not in a classical way, even though I didn't know what does it mean a classical way in those days. So it was an experiment, and it was very much from my gut, which I miss sometimes, because I think it's quite good to make it from your heart, the photographs you make. But this is the biggest difference between then and now. Like, I know the medium, I know more or less what it's capable of, and it's not that, it's more conceptual now than it was in those days.
Yeah, for sure. Do you remember a specific moment or some moments where you thought, oh wow, this is the power of a picture? Or do you remember some moments of that?
Well, as I told you, I met a lot of Polish photographers in the school, and it was quite weird because a lot of them were adult people, you know, like with experience. They were 30 years old and I was 19, so it was quite a big difference. And a year after me to the school came Andrzej Kramarz, who is a Polish photographer and curator. He lives now in Hawaii in the States, not in Poland anymore. And he was also very interested at the beginning in the classical black and white photography. And then suddenly he made pictures on a flea market in Krakow, where people were putting on the ground, we can call it a background, you know, like a carpet or something, and put different old things, like making a mosaic of stuff. And he just went there and was making this, we could say, this German type of typology photography, you know, from above, only those carpets with certain things. And when he showed me that for the first time, I was like amazed, because it was on one hand documentary, very simple, but on the other hand, the composition which was there on the ground was, it amazed me. And I was like, wow, like you can make also something like this. And this is the one moment I remember, and was particularly in the school, in the room where we were together. And the second one, I had a chance to be on a workshop with Anders Petersen. It was in 2008, I think. And I really liked him at that time, and I like his photography till today. And this was a 5-day workshop. And I remember particularly one sentence that he said, that he told us, that photography is not about photography. And this is the moment when I actually shifted from this, you know, being interested in the aesthetics and in the photography as it is, to this kind of knowing what the medium is capable of.
I have to check out this series with the carpets and the flea markets. It's still in my mind.
I will send you the link later.
Because I think when I haven't seen it yet, but when I think about it, it's like interesting, because the sellers maybe thought a little bit about it, like arranging it on the carpet, so it has like a staged feeling, but only the perspective and the view from the photographer makes it like really like staged. Yeah,
but they were not staged, you know. It was like, it just staged because he staged them in his picture.
Because I guess you don't have any surroundings. You just have the backdrop and the things.
Website.
Yeah. So you can't really tell that it's a flea market. It could also be like a shop or some advertising photography, you know, but it's like documentary. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, come on. I cannot find his website. It's really, but it was on Lens Cultures one day. So probably, yeah. Yep.
I think you can also share your screen. It should work. I have.
Yeah, it's possible.
Or there it is.
But I sent you the link already in chat.
Yeah, let's see that. Bam.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I think it's 2007, something like this. Yeah, and this is a self-portrait as well, so you can see him here, reflecting.
That's an interesting layer. Yeah. Oh, come on.
All those pop-ups.
Here you have a little bit of surroundings.
And this what was actually also very interesting. There was a book published, and the publisher was an ethnographical museum in Krakow. So this was also very interesting from me because it went out of the bubble, like of the photography bubble. And the text that was also the curatorial text in the book is also not only from the photographical point of view made, but also from the anthropological and ethnographical one. So this is also the proof that photography can be also useful to different, which is of course obvious, but it can be also useful to different people, not only connected to art or photography.
It's like really chaotic in a way, which I hadn't in my mind. I thought it was like really big things, but I like that even more.
And imagine that we were all really into this black and white photography where you had like all those plants and layers in the picture. It was extremely well seen when there was something happening on the right side, then on the left side, and then something was flying on heaven. And this was this type of image that we were really in love with. And then suddenly he comes up with something like this, and I'm not skeptical, but which I was probably at the time, and I just see it and think, wow, this is also a possibility or an option to work with photography. And this was actually very good from my point of view in the school, that I have to be honest and say that I learned a lot from my colleagues, and even more from my colleagues than from the teachers. The school has this great system that it's still today, that you don't go every day to the school, but we just meet 5 times or 6 times during the academical year. And this is always in Beskid Mountains in Czech Republic, where they are renting a students' hotel. And we lived there for 4 days altogether. So we talk a lot about photography, we party, we make friendships. And I have to say that there was a lot of Polish students in that period of time there. And with most of them, I'm still in contact and we are still friends. So this is really a great thing about this school.
Yep. That's also, I think that's in every school around the globe. Like Sebastian and me, we studied in Bielefeld photography, and it's exactly the same. Like the most you get from studying photography is like the other people you're studying with and the connections you make, and you will be with that group like basically for the rest of your life, I think. Like I stopped studying like 5 years ago, and I still meet bits and pieces of the people I studied with from now. Some are in like agencies or in newspaper or photographing themselves. It's like insane. And that's also interesting, like the last 2.5 years with the pandemic, I think that's an issue for all the students which haven't been in the university at all, and which are just studying on a screen. I think that's really a problem. I talked about that with Alexander Gehring. He holds a course at the FH in Bielefeld, and he said, they've never seen the university from inside. It's like completely different. Because they don't have this interaction with themselves. They don't go out party and talk about it. Like I remember, Sebastian, when I think the first 2 semesters we met after the courses, we met at your place actually, at the Orchester, and just talked about real talk, all the stuff we couldn't talk to the teachers. because we were like, oh,
Yes.
we can't say that here. We just talked to ourselves afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's important. I mean, I'm studying right now. I'm studying social work in first semester, and it's like a hybrid between going to the place and also having some Zoom courses. And still, it's just 2 days I go to university, and I really feel like I haven't met anyone yet, really. I haven't really had any real talk. I have some groups and it's growing, but I feel like if you study anything, you really need the surrounding buildings and the people, because then you talk about a lot of stuff about your studies, but also about private stuff, and you grow with people. You always grow with people. You always communicate. We always try to express ourselves and learn about each other. And I think the epidemic really cut these things short for us. So I'm glad universities open up again. And yeah, it's really important to speak to people and to see their works and to see how they are doing their stuff. Because if you're isolated, you don't learn. And I knew as I went to university for photography, I was like, oh man, I have to see so many photography books because I was like so much of an outsider. It was just happenstance. I got a camera and just started for myself. I had no one to talk to. And then I started university and I was like, man, I have no clue about this topic. I don't know anything about it. So I felt really afraid sometimes because all the people around me were so good photographers and were so quick with all the stuff and comprehending all the information about photography. And I was like, I don't even know how to start anything. So it was really interesting to get into the field and talk to the people to get a grasp about the whole topic. And even to see prints on the wall and see all the other works and see how they visualize their work. Yeah.
I think this is a good connection to a question Katharina asked on Instagram. What do you think? What would you? I can't find the English word.
Was brauchst du denn?
Rat?
Was?
Also was du einem jungen Fotografen, der im dokumentarischen Bereich arbeiten will, raten würdest? What is raten würden?
What advice would
Suggest?
you give to a
Advice,
young
advice it is.
Advice. Yeah, what advice would you give to a young photography person who's just starting? What wisdom could you share?
Wisdom.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
especially in the documentary field, you know.
Well, it's easy to say, but on one hand, you shouldn't be afraid of people. So you should be curious about them. This is actually, I think, very important because either ways you take portraits or not, but you still work in this in the reality. So you have to deal with people. And I am very shy, for example, and I know I cannot approach anyone on the street and ask him or her to take a picture. But I know that from being in a place for a certain period of time, that the people see you not only once, but twice or 5 times or something like this. They know that you are not here just to make one snapshot for Instagram, but you are, you know, like engaged into a topic and you have to talk a lot with the people. And I think that, you know, not to be afraid, to be curious about them, to make connections. And I have to say, I tried it, and this is very good, a good option that you bring, which is very old and typical, that you bring the people also the photographs that you are making them, or things that they own or are engaged to. So this also gives you an opportunity to make a relation with the people then. And the other thing is to be really focused and to work hard, because and to be open for errors. It's always like this, that you don't get the pictures when you go for the first or the second time. You have to, know the space. I'm not saying about, journalism, which is a completely different situation, where you have to go somewhere and bring a photograph that informs, shows a situation. But in the documentary photography, you have to check the opportunities, the aesthetics that will fit to the subject you are making photographs of, and so work hard and not to be afraid of the people and the errors you will do in the process of making the project.
That's interesting. Do you bring a like a print to the people?
Well, for the last 10 years, probably I was not making portraits, but in the early days, I made for example, a project which is called Nikish, about a mining suburb here in Katowice, where I live, and I was making this project 3 years long. So it was really typical that the people knew already that when I will meet them in 2 months, I will have in my backpack a print for them. So it was very normal that even when I was making an exhibition in the museum at the spot there was a wall with small prints that the people could just take from the wall and bring it back with them to their home, or albums they had in their homes. And I think this is quite a nice situation, because I'm going from that point that, to make someone a photograph is an exchange, like I make a picture, but they also allow me to do it. So when I can give them also this record of them, I think it's simply nice.
Yep. Do you have this mining series on your page?
This old one, I don't think so.
You don't think so? No, I can't see it.
No, but I will find it. Give me a second.
I'm just opening your page now.
Uh-huh.
But I think this is the series where your name like first popped up on my radar.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was an award. Maybe it could be even lens culture, I think. But it's some years ago. I have like this folder on my laptop with things I should check out, and I number them like from 1 to, I don't know how many I have now. And then I look at it like chronologically, and when I have one done, the next is gone, and then your name popped up, and I thought, oh, this looks cool. We have to get him on the show. And I think, can you talk a little bit about this series? I think it's about an earthquake in Armenia.
Yes. Yes. So the project 1149 is actually the hour of the earthquake that took place in 1988 in Armenia, and it's part of a bigger project, because I'm a member of Sputnik Photos Collective, and we have made in I think it was 2014, 2018, more or less, 17, a big project called Lost Territories. And the idea was to visit all the 15 countries that got independent after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. So we traveled. I'm not saying that I was in all the 15 countries, but we managed to cover all the countries. We were 5-6 photographers in that period of time, and Armenia was one of them. And I chose to visit Armenia. I also like to have a kind of personal connection to the subject I will take picture of. And the only like click that I had with Armenia was that I remembered this earthquake, even although I was 5 years old. So it means that it had to be a really big disaster that even children in the kindergarten were aware of. So I tried to find informations about this this tragedy, and I found a reportage from a Polish television. We had a really interesting series of reportages about former Soviet Republic, which is called Szerokie Tory. And there was a story about a guy who, after 15 years, I would say, got finally keys to his new apartment, because Spitak, the city where I was completely destroyed. There was not even one house that was not ruined. So all the years they were building new houses, and finally this guy got keys from the mayor and he entered his new apartment. So it was for me very interesting, and I started to look more about this earthquake and the aftermath. And although Spitak was not the biggest city in the region where the earthquake was, the Leninakan was called the biggest city at that time. Spitak was kind of a symbol of this tragedy. So I was there 4 times, I think, and for the first my first visit was like I had some ideas to how to develop a project there, but this is the example when you go somewhere with ideas and then you see a completely different reality, then you have to change your approach. And I made there like more journalistic story about because there was this really weird situation where it's even in the information here under that it was the first time that Soviet Union asked for help Western countries. And also Germans were involved to help, and they built, I don't know now this English word, but eine deutsche Siedlung war gebaut. Siedlung?
Maybe suburb or
village, maybe
community.
Yeah, community
of
let's say
houses,
community. Yeah.
So most of the countries that went with help, they built some kind of communities for the people. Like Italians built some communities and the others. So, and the German was really interesting because they brought like those wooden houses where you rest during the vacation. And it's supposed to be a very for a short period of time, like for 2 years, when the authorities will rebuild the city. But those 2 years were actually 20 some years. So everyone got one house, but then I was also taking pictures of the houses outside because each family rebuilt the house in a completely different way. So I made a story about this German community there. And I heard a lot of stories. The people were very open to tell stories. And I went to this idea that, I cannot show the stories in the pictures because they were so precisely detailed and very emotional. So I thought when I was back then that I have to go back with someone who will write the stories down, and we can do something with this later. And I was lucky to have a friend who is now a very famous Polish writer, Philip Springer, who wrote a book about Miedzianka, which is a small city in Sudety Mountains that disappeared completely because there was a uranium mine there. So I called him and said, I have a story for you about a city that disappeared because of an earthquake. So he was interested to go with me, and we started to work together for 2 weeks there. And we had this one idea at the beginning that we are making a book together, but I am not with my pictures. I am not illustrating his text, and he is not describing with his text the meaning of my photographs. So we divided our approach more or less during the work, and it ended up that we had like 3 chapters in the book that came later on. And in my photographs, I cover the reality after the earthquake and right before the earthquake, because the hour 1141 made those 2 realities in which the society there lives. On one hand, they built a legend about Spitak before the earthquake, that it was a great place to live. And on the other hand, we have the reality now, which is very, as you can see on the photographs, very, how can I say it? They are not finishing the stuff that they are creating, you know, because they are afraid of losing it again because of an earthquake that will come again. So I was focused on things with the color photographs, and then you will see the reproduction of the graves, which is connected to the legends or mythologic about the past of Spitak, where you can see the people being shown in a good wealth and happiness, you can say. And Philip covered with his text portraits, personal stories, and the landscape of the place. So I think in this situation we found a solution that the relation between text and photographs gives you something more, and is not, as I said at the beginning, something that cuts, you know, like the meaning of the photographs, which is always a bit brighter when you leave it open, and the photographs gives you also a historical context to the whole situation.
And how was it for you? I mean, you remembered the happenstance and you were 5 years old and you heard from it. And then after so many years going to this place, how did it feel for you at the first place? I mean, you don't instantly start making photographies, but how could you recollect the memory and then being there? How did it feel for you?
Well, before I went there, I made research also, and I saw the news that came in Polish television from that period of time. So I know how it was shown by the media, and also my friend photographer from the school, Mariusz Forecki, was also there as a photojournalist in those days. So I also knew his photographs. You know, it was a completely different landscape when we came there, or when I came there for the first time. This is was like 8 years ago, a very weird city, in the sense that they rebuilt the city center, but the communities are spread around it in a very large circle, where, you know, there was a flat place where previous there was no buildings, then they were putting the houses there. So from the urbanistical point of view, this is a very interesting place. So the first days I was like, you know, trying to map all the city and know more or less the opinion of the people who lived there. And I even met the guy who I saw in the reportage. So we were driving with the car, and I said stop to my friend Grigor, who was my translator, and I just ran after him and I said, hey, I saw you in a Polish television and your story about your flat. So he was like amazed for in the beginning, but then I, with my, I speak Russian, but really a little bit. So he needs some few moments to understand me. But this were the first days, and I was quite I was amazed also by the openness of the people there. So I can imagine that. Well, I made some pictures in Germany but in Poland, I have to say this is quite difficult. People are always afraid when you have a camera. And then was a completely different situation. Like I was going with my camera and the people were asking, who are you? What are you doing here? But from, they were just curious. There was no suspicious or something like this. And this was really amazing for me at the beginning, that everybody wanted to tell their story. And this was also for Philip very difficult from that point of view, that he had so many material. He collected so many interviews and stories that he was afraid that the colleagues from Poland will not believe him, that so many different and very vivid stories he could collect in such a short period of time.
I think that's fascinating for me, that people are so willing to talk about this dramatic event, Like, I think it's fascinating, even when you look at like catastrophes, or like an earthquake, or even when a city is completely like destroyed, like from war or whatever. I think it's fascinating for me that we humans, we always have this, we're gonna rebuild this place in our head, like we're not like, oh, we're moving on, this is like a dramatic event, I want to close this chapter and move somewhere else. Sure, there are some people who are doing this, but in the greater scheme, we humans, we're always like, oh, we're gonna rebuild this place and make it work again. I think that's fascinating for me.
Yeah, and that's why the story is kind of universal. And this is what was for us very important, because we have a similar situation in Warsaw that was completely destroyed during the Second World War. And the legend of Warsaw being a wonderful city because before the Second World War is simply not true. There was like 5 or 4 fantastic streets, with this kind of Paris or of North, but most of the city was without electricity, and there was a lot of problems with housing and stuff like this. So this is also this situation where you build a myth about the place. Spitak was also not the Eden on the earth during the communist period at the time, but the people just invented it because they wanted to feel better in this situation and have a goal to go forward in their life. So this is very, very typical for us humans when we confront this tragedy like this. And there was also this idea that they will not rebuild Spitak, but the people were against it. As the text mentions, the 1/3 of the inhabitants of Spitak died there during this earthquake. So the families didn't want to leave them there. So they wanted to stay with their, this is also a bit different than we have here in this part of Europe, situation about the family, where in Armenia people still live in families with 3 or 4 generations together. So the connections and the relationships are very strong, and they wanted simply to stay there. So the problem also was with the rebuilding of the city that the USSR collapsed 3 years later, and Armenia become independent, but also a very, very poor country at the beginning. So, you know, from our perspective, we can say, how couldn't they rebuild it faster? But you have to know all the other stories that were after to know that the situation was so long. And but I have to say also at the end that the youngest generation that I met, the people there, they are not anymore connected to the tragedy as their parents are. They know the story, they kind of feel it and understand it, but they want to go forward. They have I would say they love their place on earth and they want to do it better. So this is kind of this NGO way of thinking when you start to organize your community and your city by your own, not waiting for the authorities to do it.
When you said that you've been there like 4 times?
Yes.
Is this like 4 times, but maybe like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or was it just one day going there?
No, it was 10 days, 2 weeks, 1 week, and 1 week, more or less.
Has this place like a hotel or a hostel, or where did you stay?
Yeah, there was a hotel, and there is also YMCA in Spitak with great people there. So I think I was 3 times in the hotel and 1 time at the YMCA.
This picture is interesting for me. Is it found, or did you arrange these
This is a
cubics
very
and stuff?
interesting story, which is also described in the book. This is a former art teacher who is retired, and he is now in his free time teaching young people and preparing them for exams to the art school in Yerevan. There is this right at the beginning, after the building collapsed and before the Western countries came with the houses there, the USSR used simply train wagons to put them on the streets where the people could live. It's called wagonchiks. And this is the art class that he is making is in the wagonchik where he lived right after the earthquake. And now he is using it for art classes, and this is just a still life of shapes that the students have to draw.
I really like that in the series because it's like really symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
Like building it up again.
Yeah, and
having
those,
these,
like really simple shapes, and yeah. And a great man, you know. I have to say that this is one of the people I've met there that he was really, you know, he survived the earthquake because he went to the playground in the school, because he told us that he let the pupils 3 minutes before the break, and that's why most of them survived, because they were on outside. Even it was December, but they were outside the school. And he also and he had really an interesting stories to tell us about animals that they were seeing rats fleeing a day before, or wolves running on the streets a day before, which was never happening.
Wow.
So he was the guy who told us all those interesting stories.
Well, when you're a photographer at this place and you're hearing all these stories, does that make you see or act differently when you're on the search for pictures?
Yes, and actually it was a problem, you know, because when we went there, for the second trip was with Philip, and he does not speak Russian, at all, and I speak a bit, and our translator got sick right the first day, and he went to Yerevan. And so we we stayed without the translator. So I had to be the translator. He was recording also, but I was the guy who was trying to question the people. And the system was like this, that we came to someone, we talked at first, so I was involved in the conversation, and then with all the knowledge in the stories, I started to photograph. And suddenly when I came back and made the prints, I realized that I actually made illustrations for the information that they were giving us, and that's why I have to that's why I have to go the third and fourth time to because Philip is a hard worker, and he, 2 weeks after the trip, I got already the text for the book, so I knew exactly the space that he covers, and it was easier for me not to step into his field with the photographs. So answering in a simple way your question, it was a disaster for me, because I was really concentrated on the, you hear so many interesting things, and then you automatically would like to engage your photographs to what you heard, but it just I think, like, because we interviewed an old lady with her daughter. This is actually their garden, the photograph you were showing, and they are living in a house that is like a half of a house. They destroyed the half of the house and left them, and it looks like a half of a house, but it was not a good picture in a sense. So it's better to live it in your imagination, because Philip writes about it, than showing it's actually on the picture. And this photograph, as you know, working with Earth, was also symbolic in the sense that everything, it's actually, I think, the opening picture of the book, which is in a sense like being a photograph which shows you that we will be digging, or being constantly in a relation to the ground.
Interesting. So you went with him, and afterwards, is it a analog work? Is it shot with analog film?
Yes, the color photographs, yes, but those photographs here, this is digital because it was, wiser, and from the economical point of view, it was better to make them on a digital camera.
But most of the time, you first see the pictures when you're back home, and then you realize, oh, this is like really similar to the stories. I have to get back on my own.
Yes.
As a photographer, do you see, even if you take analog pictures, do you have these moments when you take a picture and you instantly know, oh, this is a good one, this is going to end up in a book?
Yes, well, I can say that I'm sometimes surprised, and I say, wow, what a picture. I didn't expect it. But if it will end in a book, I'm not sure, because I know this expression, kill your darlings. So during the process of editing the photographs, very often you have to edit them out because they don't fit into the project or into the book.
Did you know after the fourth visit that it's enough, or how do you? I think I reframed the question: how do you end a story or a project?
Well, this is a tough one. We all know the expression long-term project.
Yeah.
So it's always good to have some kind of grant or scholarship that defines you the end. But in this case, I was quite sure that I was everywhere. You know, I saw everything, and like everything. But for the idea of the book, it's enough that I will not bring anything new if I will go for the 5th time. So and this is the situation where I knew it, because I made it for me that the point of reference was also the text of the written by Philip. So I knew that there is no sense to go for the 5th time, and we had also a different work to do. I went also to Uzbekistan later on for this Sputnik project, so there was no sense to do it for the 5th time. I'm working now on a project here in Silesia, which is far more difficult to finish than when you have to travel somewhere, because this is right here and you can always make it a bit better.
Exactly, yeah. And why did you guys decided to make it a book? Was it the idea in the first place, or did it develop?
In the first place, not. But after I came from the first trip, I really wanted to give a shot. It's not easy to publish a book, also from the point of view of money and other stuff. But the cooperation with Philip and his engagement actually made this book possible, because all the production, he was really involved and engaged in it. So thanks to him, actually, the book exists as a book. But we had also this agreement in Sputnik that we will not publish the smaller projects before we will show for the first time the Lost Territories project, which was actually a very good idea, because the Lost Territories project had this idea of having a common author, that we were not described under the photographs. Just Sputnik Photos was the author of the exhibition or the book. But then the books that popped after the first exhibition, my book or Rafał Milak's book or Jan Brykczyński book, they were also a new context for the whole project and for the exhibitions that came afterwards. So we had to wait, like the book was ready, but we had to wait, I think, 18 months to publish it. So it was, I was not that happy when I had to wait.
Yeah, I can guess. So because it's always like, when you have it finished, then you want to show it, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess so. It's really fascinating for me, this work, and also this greater work about all these countries which got independent. What do you think about the current situation? Like, obviously Russia has a thought like getting some countries back, and what do you think about this whole situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is quite interesting, because no one approaches us with that question, knowing that we have this large project about those territories. But I have to say that this was our common experience, that when we were in those countries, everywhere you feel that Russia is somewhere around, like even, and it's not expressed by the people, but you can just simply feel it. And we, having our experience from being in a communist country, feel it, I think, even more, because you can show it, about the energy policy of Armenia, the gas policy, that everything actually belongs to Russia, besides the place where you heat your water or boil your water, but all the infrastructure is actually not Armenian. So, but on the other hand, you just feel it that if you are in Uzbekistan or in Ukraine or in Armenia, there is somewhere above this feeling that the story is not the end of the story. And we had a really interesting meeting in Berlin in Ost about the project, and there was this scientists from University of Warsaw, Wojciech Górecki, who express it in a very simple way, that the collapse of the Soviet Union is a process, and it's an ongoing process. It's not finished. And I think that everything what happens now, it's a part of this ongoing process, which will be probably 50 years longer than we think, because we are in this period of time. For us, it's long, but on the sheets of a historical book, it's just one page, sometimes. So I would say that there was this feeling that Russia did not give up, and that the 80 or 90 years of being in this region or in those territories is still visible, and you can feel it.
Yeah, for sure. I was in Kyrgyzstan in 2019, and it was also everywhere. It was obvious. Like, I think Kyrgyzstan is one of the poorest countries which got independent, and there you can feel it. And if you talk to the people there, they would wish that the union is getting back. Like,
yeah, for some of them, of course, I had also, like conversations in the style that Stalin was a great guy, and what can you say to someone who expressed something like this? But this is the question of that we had also here in Poland. Sometimes there are people who still say, for laborers it was better. Well, in some way it was, because you didn't have to think about anything. You just went to your job, you got your money, your kids had vacation organized, and other fests were organized for them. So all your life were organized. Then suddenly you have this kind of, and in our Polish situation, this turbo capitalism in the beginning of the 90s, and the people just don't know what to do with it, and they just get poorer and poorer, and some small percent of the people are getting richer and richer. So the division is starting to be very visible. But I have to say also one other thing, that in all those countries where I was, you also see this urge to create their own story and their own nationality. Yep. So Uzbekistan, for example, was trying really hard to define what does it mean to be Uzbek, Armenia, of course, doesn't have this problem because it is a very, very old nation that could, teach us what does it mean to to have a culture.
An own identity. Yeah.
Yes, but they were really strongly trying to develop this identity for them. But one thing also that what is also very interesting for me, I'm a kind of hip hop fan, and we have in Katowice where I live, there was important hip hop groups in the 90s. So I'm always interested, what kind of hip hop do you hear when you are in Armenia, for example? And I have to say that they were very Russian concentrated when it comes to the hip hop scene. So it shows also that the pop culture, they were focused more on Russia than on East. And Russia is focused on United States and makes a mix from, the US culture and their culture. And then it's, again, traveling to Armenia or Uzbekistan, for example, which is always very interesting. So, so this is also a kind of answer on the question.
Yeah. That's fascinating for me, all these things. Like what I think, what really like baffles me when I look the news in in Germany or in Europe in general, that I think like the Germans are really surprised about the situation. And like you said, it's a process, and it's not like from one day, or this is it. Now it's not the union. Now they're all their own countries, and it's gonna be like that. And that's the end of the story. And I think, like, I don't know if it's just my feeling, but I have the feeling that in Germany, like the politicians, and they're really surprised about the situation unfolding. And I think that it's obvious. Like,
Yeah, you know,
it's
I
just a
have
normal process.
a lot of connections to Germany because I have a large part of my Silesian family lives in Baden-Württemberg, and I also studied 1 year in Hanover in the Fachhochschule.
Oh, cool.
So you know, I remember, and I know sometimes because we talk or I see in the news that our politicians, I'm not saying about the guys that are governing now, but the previous ones, they were really alarming always when it comes to Russia. And everybody in the Western world were like, oh, come on, the story is over, as you said. Let's do business, you know, Wandel durch Handel. And then now we see that actually this kind of approach to, I will not say, to Russia was an error, and some of the Polish politicians have this, you know, Schadenfreude that they were right, you know, but being right in this situation like this, it's not fun. I think so. But there is a really interesting text. You can Google it. We have a quite famous writer here in Silesia, Szczepan Twardoch, who is translated into German. All of his books are already translated, and he wrote some articles for German press, for Die Welt, for example, or something about this issue that you mentioned. So he expressed quite well the Polish point of view in contrast to the Western point of view. So it's something that is interesting to read for me, but I think also for you. So
I have to check that out. Yeah, man, thanks that you've been on the show. I think this is like a good ending.
Okay.
I think.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Do you have what are you currently working on? Do you have any projects or stuff?
Yeah, I work on the project that it's on the top here. It's called Extraction, and it's about the consequences of coal mining in the Silesia region where I live. But it's less documentary in the classical way. It's more trying to find a visual option to show the consequences. And there should be an exhibition in June in Wrocław, in the main station, the Bureau of how can I translate it? It's called BWA, Biuro Wystaw Artystycznych, has a large space there in the train station, a large gallery. So I invite you all to the exhibition in June 2023 with Ania Orłowska, who will have a separate show, but in the same space. And the other one is Forest Works, which is something about the politics of extracting wood from Polish forests, which we have a lot of them still, and they are quite unique because they are similar to primeval forest. So this is also a bit different situation because I'm making kind of small performances or situation where I go into the space where they were cutting trees and try to fix it in a way, but it's not fixable anymore. So these are those two projects I'm working now.
And these are
until the end.
Yeah. I think you guys have the last primal forest in Europe, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking about
Yeah.
it. I heard that there's somewhere in East Europe, there's this one little tiny place. It's all natural and wasn't deforested, and it's
Yeah, they wanted to deforest not precisely the national park, but right beside it, where the forest looks like the one which is in the frames of the national park. But thanks to the activists at the spot and the European Union Court, they lost it and they cannot do it anymore. But there were some cuttings already, so unfortunately they did some bad stuff there.
They did some damage already, yeah. Isn't it like, I always think that places like that should be like UNESCO World Heritage, that there can't be anything done, but it's not the case, isn't it?
It's very, very difficult because we have now this case where I also photograph in Bieszczady. These are the mountains that are have border with Ukraine, and and there is also a national park there. But there is a lot of forest which is similar to the national park, but they are cutting trees there because they just want to do it. And the most of the people who live there work with wood, in a sense that all the industry there and their income is connected to wood. So it's really difficult to explain the people, which I think it's quite logical, to make to change completely the economical situation there, because there are some university studies made that if they will transfer only to tourists or the touristical market, they will have more income than from the wood. But it will not happen from 1 year to another.
Yeah, it's a process again.
So this is really difficult. There are some activists group that are trying to educate, to talk, but there is a large opposition there to do it, and also the politics that we have coming from the Warsaw supports actually the extraction of everything, like coal extraction, wood extraction, to get income and working places for the people.
Yeah, that sounds like a really, really good cause and a really important topic, I think. I always thought about going to this primal forest. I have it also on my to-do list on my computer, but I haven't managed.
This is now a really weird moment, because the same forest, as you are mentioning, is also the place where we have now this crisis with incomers from Belarus, like from Syria or Egypt or from other African countries. So this is actually the spot where all the activists are rescuing the lives of the people, especially during the winter time. So I was there, and I, imagine the situation that you are coming from Syria and someone pushes you into this type of forest during the winter time, where you don't have any clue about the plants you see and the sounds that the wolves or bears or whatever is making. So the people are completely afraid, also because not only because of the situation, but because of the nature that they don't know nothing about it.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's a really interesting collision of stories and places. Interesting. Now we opened up another chapter.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
We were finished, and now a new subject is opened up. But I think we can leave it. We can leave it like that.
Yeah.
Or Sebastian, do you have anything left?
No, not really. I mean, everything was discussed so nicely. I was just listening all the time, so not really, no.
Yeah, thank you so much again that you have been on the
Yes,
show.
thank you.
Thank you guys
think
for
we-
inviting me.
We're gonna link everything, also the exhibition, and maybe we're gonna make it. Like, I mean, it's half a year ahead, so
Yeah,
we can
and
plan.
it's not that far away. It's Wrocław, so
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
Let me stop the